Thinking about buying an historic home in Lancaster? Well, before you fall in love with the charm, here are a few things you need to know. Lancaster, Pennsylvania has some beautiful old colonial style homes, whether that be a beautiful townhouse or a majestic mansion. As someone who owns one of these homes, I'm going to be breaking down in this video the most common questions I get asked by potential buyers of them, what it's like to actually renovate one, and whether it's actually worth it. What qualifies as an historic home in Lancaster? Now, some of these homes are going to be actually in the historical district. They're going to be registered with the township, and some of these can be a little bit restrictive on what you're able to do. Many homes built before 1940 fall into this category, and you'll typically find them in downtown Lancaster or Lidditz and sometimes Mannheim. Now, something to note is not all of these older homes are regulated, but some of them are. Are there restrictions on renovations or exterior changes? This is one of the biggest surprises for buyers. Typically, if a home is registered historic, they're going to be very restrictive on the changes you can make. So if you're looking at changing the windows, the doors, changing the roof, changing the color of the outside of the property, changing the siding or the brick, or doing any additions or structural changes, you are nearly always going to have to go to the township and make sure you get it approved first. What inspections are especially important for these older historic homes? If you're able to get your offer accepted with these, I would recommend trying to get some of the following inspections. Because of the age of them, you want to get someone to take a look at the foundation and the brickwork. You'll also want to get someone out to check the roof. One of the big ones is electrical. If the home has knob and tube wiring in it, it can be incredibly expensive to replace. The plumbing, you want to make sure all of the lead pipes have been removed because this can be incredibly dangerous to drink from. And if it has a chimney, you want to make sure that it's also in working order. Now, historic homes are built well. They've been standing for over 100 years, most of them, so it's likely they'll still be standing. However, you want to make sure you're not going to be chucking money in a hole to try and get one fixed. Are historic homes expensive to maintain? Now, as someone who owns one and has been renovating one, the answer is yes. So just ongoing maintenance is going to be far higher than that of a new home, especially if the mechanicals on the inside are older. And there are just a few things you have to consider when actually taking on the project of an older home too. Typically, your windows are going to be custom, or if they're made out of wood, you're going to have to get a carpenter to come and fix them, which can massively increase the cost of windows. With the roofing, lots of the older homes, you'll have slate roof or at least part slate roof and then rubber on the top. This is going to be more expensive than replacing asphalt shingle, and it can be trickier to get done, especially if you're in a townhome downtown. You're going to have to apply for permits and be nice to your neighbors in order to get that work done. In older homes, typically you won't have drywall on these homes either. They'll have something called horsehair plaster and lath. This is a lot heavier and it can be a lot more tricky to kind of demo. To remove all of the old plaster and replace it with drywall is going to be very expensive and very, very messy. Adding HVAC can be very expensive also. I had a quote for my house, and to have HVAC on the ground floor, it was around $12,000. And then we were going to have to do mini splits because there wasn't existing ductwork in order to just run normal, a normal furnace or normal AC unit in the property. So all in all, we were looking at about $35,000 to have HVAC on the floor and then mini splits on floors 2 and 3. One of the big things to think about, can historic homes qualify for conventional FHA and VA financing? Now, if you're going the conventional route, you're most likely going to be okay. Again, not in all cases. They can be a lot more lenient on the appraisals. But if you're buying a home, especially if it looks like it needs work, FHA and VA can be much more restrictive on their appraisals, which means you're either going to have to get a lot more work done before you purchase the property, or the deal may fall apart before it gets anywhere. If it's looking more like a fix and flip property, conventional is probably going to be your best bet, or cash, as if it needs major work doing, it's going to be very tricky to get an FHA or VA appraiser to approve the property. Are there tax benefits or grants to owning an old home? Potentially, yes. And this is going to totally depend on where you are, what township, what type of home you have. There can be some grants available to help you reduce some of the renovation costs or to reimburse you for them. Now, what I will say is the cost of doing these renovations is probably going to be higher because you're going to have to use specific materials and specific contractors. So it's probably going to balance itself out. Is buying an historic home in Lancaster a good long-term investment? In many cases, yes is the answer. Old historic homes in Lancaster are always going to appeal to people who like the charm of an older home. They're also going to be right in the downtown area of Lancaster. Like, for example, we live maybe 10-15 minutes away from Central Market. We can walk to the Fulton Theatre. It's very, very easy for us to get around and enjoy the local restaurants, but we're only 5 or 10 minutes drive away from the major shopping centers. Now, as someone who owns one of these homes, what I will say is there's going to be far more things that go wrong than go right. You might be really lucky and get one that's been well looked after and renovated. However, these can be pretty expensive these days. I think you're probably looking at somewhere between $350,000 and $500,000, depending on what part of town you're in. Just be mindful of some of the flippers that are going on. Just because a home has been renovated, it doesn't mean they've taken care of some of the major issues. So getting that home inspection to check things like the roof, the HVAC, and the foundation can be really essential. But if you're someone who doesn't really like the idea of doing lots of work themselves, it may be easier to go for one of the more modern townhouses or something that's maybe going to not quite need as much maintenance. Now, if you are still thinking about purchasing an historic home in Lancaster, potentially want to know how competitive the market is, click this video. Or if you just want to know, is Lancaster even a good place to live, then you can check this video out here as well.